The sky above Vadris Minor was burning, not with the gentle, orange glow of a setting primary, but with the harsh, strobing lacerations of kinetic impactors striking the atmospheric shield. Commander Valara Ezri felt the deep-throated rumble of the bombardment through the soles of her boots, a constant tremor that vibrated up through the ferrocrete floor of the command bunker and settled into her molars. The air tasted of recycled static and fear. She pressed a trembling hand against the console, her reflection staring back at her from the polished screen, a face smeared with dust and exhaustion, eyes wide but steady. The main status board was a tapestry of cascading failures. Orbital Platform Gamma was gone. The defense grid had less than 6 minutes of viable charge left in its capacitors. The Vrex Dominion siege fleet hung in low orbit like a black, metallic cancer, 15 capital ships strong, their dagger-shaped profiles blotting out the distant nebula that usually dominated the night. Valara leaned into the console and activated the colony's deep space relay, aiming the dish toward the distant, cold spark of the galactic core where Earth sat, impossibly far away. She knew the relay was a pathetic gesture. Even at maximum burst speed, this signal would take years to cross the vast gulf of the rift. No help was coming. The coreward colonies had gone dark decades ago, consumed by their own bureaucracy and the horrors of the Silence Wars. Vadris Minor was a frontier speck, a forgotten venture. She wasn't calling for help. She was writing an epitaph. Command log final entry, she spoke, her voice hoarse. Vadris Minor colony established 63 years ago, population 4,219. We were a research outpost, an agricultural test bed, a home. A Vrex Dominion battle fleet arrived in System 7 hours ago. They have ignored all hails and rejected an unconditional civilian surrender. They are conducting a punitive saturation bombardment. She paused, swallowing the metallic tang in her mouth. To anyone who receives this, know that we held. We rigged the geothermal taps to blow. They will claim a dead rock. This is Commander Valara Ezri. This was Vadris Minor. A hiss of static cut through the bunker's comms, followed by a synthetic, guttural voice. The Vrex translation matrix slathered its oily cadence over the speakers. Human infestation. Your defiance is noted. Your genetic material is now a sanctioned resource for Dominion processing vats. You will power our war machine in death. Prepare for atmospheric incineration. This is the mercy of the Vrex. Valara closed her eyes. Atmospheric incineration. They were going to crack the crust. She heard the sharp, panicked breathing of her comms officer, a young man named Jaraz who hadn't seen his second harvest. She reached out and gripped his shoulder hard, willing strength into him. This was it. The end of a dream swallowed by the black. The floor shook harder now, a screaming, tearing sound echoing down from the surface as the Vrex lances started to carve lines of fire across the main continent. Then Jaraz spoke. His voice was not terrified, it was confused. "Commander, ma'am, I'm getting a ghost ping from the deep space passive array. An echo. No, not an echo, a gravimetric shadow." Valara's eyes snapped open. She pushed past him, staring at the raw telemetry. It was a ripple in spacetime itself, a contortion of physics bleeding off the sensors. Something was touching down on the edge of the system, not from a slipspace vector, but tunneling through the substructure of reality with a velocity that broke every known logarithmic scale. The waveform didn't match a Vrex signature. It didn't match any known Xeno pattern. It was screaming toward them on a direct, absolute intercept course, and it was massive. Part 2. The Gravimetric Echo. Aboard the Vrex Dominator Skull of Prophecy, War Commander Skarn observed the surface devastation with the cold, clinical satisfaction of a surgeon peeling back a layer of infected flesh. The holographic tactical display shimmered before him, a blue-green grid overlaid with the red, pulsing icons of his fleet. His mandibles clicked softly, a sign of deep, predatory contentment. These humans were vermin, soft-bodied creatures who built their fragile habitats on the edge of known space, daring to claim resources that rightfully belonged to the scaled fist of the Dominion. Their tearful broadcast was amusing. Processing them into bioslurry was the natural order. Cycling primary lances for final geological fracture, his tactical officer chittered, its multiple eyes reflecting the red glow of the status panels. Estimated time to mantle breach, 90 seconds. Skarn idly traced a claw along the arm of his command throne. Hold at 60. Let them smell the heat. Fear is a vital protein for the processing vats. A new chime interrupted the symphony of destruction. A subordinate sensor operator, a low-caste Vrex with chipped scales, emitted a rapid, nervous clicking. War Commander, unidentified contact bearing 009 by 45. It is not a standard translation. Skarn's satisfaction vanished, replaced by irritation. Tactical officer, correct your subordinate before I have him processed first. A sensor malfunction from the magnetic flux of the gas giant. Ignore it. Flux does not generate sigma-9 graviton wakes, the tactical officer replied, his previous confidence gone, replaced by a stiff, analytical dread. The contact is breaking. Breaking from FTL. Skarn stood up from his throne, his heavy, plated body casting a long shadow over the pit crew. Nothing breaks on this trajectory. It vaporizes. The tactical officer's mandibles fell silent. He simply rerouted the raw visual feed to the main holographic projector, silencing every other command channel on the bridge. The image of the burning planet vanished, replaced by a black, star-flecked emptiness punctuated by the distant gleam of the Vrex vanguard. For a half-second, the space was empty. Then space bent. A single point of distorted darkness snapped into violent clarity. The UES Leviathan did not emerge from a jump gate. It did not shimmer into reality. It tore a bleeding wound in the fabric of the cosmos and slammed through it with the visceral, violent force of a physical hammer. The shockwave hit the Vrex vanguard first. The gravimetric brake pulse, a byproduct of the Leviathan's forced deceleration, expanded outward in a sphere of invisible annihilation. Vrex heavy cruisers, sleek and deadly ships that had raided 100 colonies, didn't have time to maneuver. Their molecular structure met a wall of differential gravity waves. Hull armor, designed to deflect plasma, buckled inward and stressed reactor cores screamed emergency warnings. 3 Vrex ships spun out of formation, their structural spines fractured, leaking atmosphere and frozen, shimmering corpses into the void. The Leviathan coasted to a dead stop, a silent, judgmental obelisk. It was a Reclaimer-class vessel, a design philosophy lost to most of the galaxy but burned into the nightmares of those who remembered the Purge Wars. It wasn't built for beauty. It was a slab of angular, dark gray composite armor, measuring 8 kilometers from its blunt prow to its engine cluster. It had no visible bridge, no windows. It was a weaponized continent, baptized in the absence of light. It placed itself directly between the crippled Vrex vanguard and the colony, a wall of metal shielding a dying ember. It made no hails, no energy signature scans, no demands. It simply floated there, an impossible, terrifying presence. Aboard the Leviathan's command deck, a space of dim red light and biosynthetic interfaces, Admiral Holt didn't blink. His neural link fed the tactical snapshot directly into his cortex. 15 enemy ships, 1 friendly, 4,000 lives on the line. He saw the Vrex communication laser pinging him frantically, demanding identification. Holt didn't care about their protocols. He cared about the recording captured hours ago, a final, desperate log from a brave woman named Valara. He replayed it internally, the sound of her steady voice tracking over the screech of the Vrex ultimatum. Tactical, Holt vocalized, his voice a low, resonant hum. Deploy the vocal key, broadcast it wide, let them hear what they tried to silence. Part 3, The Voice of Terra. The silence from the monolithic human vessel was more terrifying to the Vrex bridge crew than any war cry. Skarn, regaining his composure, slammed a clawed fist onto the armrest of his throne. The audacity of a single ship, a relic, To interfere with a Dominion-sanctioned purification was beyond insult. It was heresy against the food chain. "Identify yourself, unidentified vessel," Skarn roared into the open channel, his translator converting the guttural Vrex speech into sharp, jagged human syntax. "You are in violation of a declared expanse purge. This system is forfeit. These prey belong to the Dominion. Withdraw immediately or be rendered into base atoms alongside them." There was no reply. The Leviathan's hull remained dark, its weapons ports sealed. The Vrex tactical grid painted the human ship with a red target lock, but the computer couldn't complete a firing solution. The chameleon armor and gravitational lensing of the Reclaimer-class vessel were playing havoc with the targeting algorithms, shifting the ship's signature by several kilometers in random intervals. Then the broadcast came. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was a raw audio file, played on a loop, jacked into the primary command channel with enough power to override the Vrex encryption. It was Commander Valera's voice. "To anyone who receives this, know that we held. This was Vadris Minor." The recording hung in the air like smoke in a sealed room. The bridge crew of the Skull of Prophecy paused in their duties, their clawed hands hovering over touch pads. It was one thing to incinerate screaming cattle. It was another to hear their final, dignified silence broadcast back by a warship wearing a skin of death. The voice changed. A synthetic, cold, and utterly definitive tone replaced the raw emotion of the dying colonist. It was the voice of the Leviathan's integrated AI, an entity that had long ago fused its consciousness with the ship's weapon systems to bypass human reaction time. It spoke with the flat, judicial clarity of an execution warrant being read. "Attention, Vrex Dominion Warfleet. You have intercepted and processed a Terran distress signal. You have committed acts of extinction-level predation against Terran genetic signatures under the protection of the Unified Terran Armada. Your claim of biological processing violates the series conventions of galactic warfare. You are hereby classified as a hostile biosphere threat. Stand down all weapons and prepare to be boarded or be excised from the void. You have 30 standard seconds to comply." Skarn's predatory instincts screamed at him. Not a bluff. He had sacked systems with a dozen human destroyers protecting them, and they had bled just like any other carbon-based life form. But this ship had no fear chemistry. Its transmission was not a negotiation. It was an anesthetic applied before a surgical cut. The war commander's pride, a burning furnace in his chest, refused to let him bow to a solitary vessel, even one that had shattered his vanguard with its arrival shockwave. "Arrogance," Skarn snarled into the channel, his mandibles clacking with fury. "You are one ship. We are the jaws that consume suns. All batteries Alpha strike. Focus the entire fleet firepower on that relic. Teach them what happens when prey forgets its place." The holographic grid flared to blinding, searing white as every Vrex capital ship discharged its primary weapons in a synchronized, apocalyptic volley. Plasma, dense as a star's core, and metastable dark energy lances streaked across the black void, converging on the single, silent silhouette of the Leviathan. The light was so intense that, on the surface of Vadris Minor, Commander Valera flinched, watching the sky ignite through a cracked periscope, knowing the human ship had just taken a hit meant to crack a planet open. She whispered a silent apology to the brave ghost who had come too late. Part 4. Remnants of a Dead Doctrine. The Vrex Alpha strike traveled at near light speed, an impossible mass of energy that should have converted the Leviathan and the space around it into a short-lived artificial star. The light from the impact was blinding, flooding every optical sensor on the planet's surface. Valera looked away, her heart sinking. It was over. The Vrex had swatted the interloper down with the casual brutality they were famous for. But the light didn't fade into the signature thermal bloom of a vaporized vessel. It spread. The firestorm enveloped the Leviathan and then hung there, a churning, turbulent shroud of superheated, glowing atmosphere. The dispersal field, a classified hard light mesh that skimmed the event horizon of the contained singularity powering the ship, had activated. It absorbed the kinetic and thermal energy of the entire Alpha strike and, in a staggering display of thermodynamic manipulation, converted it into a diffused, radiating plasma cocoon. The physics was perverse, a declaration that the Leviathan did not simply endure damage, it ate it. Aboard the Skull of Prophecy, the tactical officer's sensor board didn't register a kill. It registered a power spike. The human ship's energy signature didn't drop. It bloomed, absorbing the attack like a thirsty desert absorbing rain. The plasma shroud flickered and then was violently sucked inward, siphoned into capillary-like conduits that pulsed with a dark, angry red light across the Leviathan's 8-kilometer hull. The ship had just recharged its high-yield capacitors using the Vrex assault. Skarn saw it. He saw the glowing, web-like pattern of absorbed energy tracing across the hull like the fiery veins of a god of war. His lower mandible, a tough chitin plate, went slack. This wasn't a warship. This was a logical paradox. It was a reclaimer. His history cortex, a library of Dominion military doctrine, suddenly screamed a warning he had arrogantly disregarded. The reclaimer class wasn't designed to fight wars. It was designed to stop them, utterly, by removing the concept of victory from the enemy's imagination. "Records match," the tactical officer chittered, his voice stripped of all protocol, replaced by raw genetic terror. "Identity confirmed. It is Leviathan, the phantom of the Purge, the annihilator of the Shoggoth sector. It is not a myth. War Commander, it consumed the plasma. It is cycling its weapon arrays." The driftcaster arrays deployed. Along the angular spine of the Leviathan, sections of the heavy composite armor retracted, revealing not gun barrels or missile tubes, but pulsating, geometric coils that glowed with the sickly gray light of gravitational distortion. The ship didn't target the Vrex flagship. It targeted the 5 heavy cruisers that had just fired the first volley. There was no beam. There was no projectile. One moment the Vrex cruisers were intact, their hulls bristling with secondary weapons. The next, they were subjected to a localized, asynchronous gravity cascade. The mass alteration weapons didn't push or pull the ships. They simply changed the fundamental value of down inside the cruisers by a factor of 50,000. Structural spars that were designed to withstand multi-gigaton stresses snapped like dried twigs as the ship's internal components tore themselves apart, each deck crushing into the next in a cascading, silent collapse. The cruisers didn't explode. They imploded, crumpling into dense, spherical balls of compressed alloy and pulped organic matter in the space of 3 seconds. The wreckage, 5 pristine spheres of crushed matter, floated silently amidst the Vrex fleet, a grotesque metallic monument to the difference between a conqueror and an exterminator. The synthetic voice of the Leviathan returned, cutting through the horrified silence on the Vrex bridge. 30 seconds have elapsed. The offer to board has expired. Status of the fleet is now at the discretion of the Admiral. A secondary channel opened, a direct laser link to the Skull of Prophecy. Admiral Holt's human voice, tired and heavy with an ancient, personal grief, spoke directly to War Commander Skarn. "Surrender the War Commander who ordered the targeting of the civilian population, and I will stop the killing. This is a personal guarantee. Your fleet will be preserved. The Dominion is already dead, Skarn. You just don't know it yet." Skarn's mind, a machine built for domination, could not process the offer. But his second-in-command, a younger, more pragmatic Vrex named Kresh, processed it immediately. He looked at the molten spheres of the heavy cruisers. He looked at the dark, terrible shape of the Leviathan. He looked at Skarn's rigid, prideful posture. And he drew his plasma sidearm. Part 5: The Death of Pride. The bridge of the Skull of Prophecy descended into a crystalline freeze-frame of treachery. Kresh's sidearm, a flat, angular instrument of Vrex design, was aimed directly at the base of War Commander Skarn's skull. The security detail, creatures conditioned to obey Skarn without question, paused in their tracks, their own weapons half-drawn, their multifaceted eyes flicking between their commander and the mutineer. It was a schism at the precipice of extinction. Skarn did not turn around. He felt the cold, specific hum of the ionizing coil just millimeters from his spinal ridge. He was a veteran of a dozen purges, a butcher of Safont species. He had faced down roaring beasts and desperate boarders, but he had never been betrayed by his own before. The sensation was a cold, foreign poison in his blood. Kresh, Skarn's voice was a low, dangerous gurgle, barely a whisper. You commit evolutionary suicide. Kill me, and the fleet will tear you apart before the human finishes us. Lower the weapon, and I will grant you a swift consumption. Dignity in the processing vats. Kresh's grip did not waver. The young Vrex's breathing was heavy, a rapid clicking sound escaping his chest plates. He was not a warrior of the old blood. He was a navigator, a thinker, a product of the Dominion's logical caste system who had watched the Leviathan violate physics with the detached horror of a mathematician watching an equation divide by zero. He had been calculating odds since the gravimetric shadow arrived. Every projection led to the same conclusion. Dignity? Kresh hissed, his mandibles clacking with desperate clarity. The human weapon obliterated 5 ships in 3 seconds. It didn't fire a shot, it thought at them and they ceased to exist. That is not an enemy. That is a natural law. We are not fighting a war, War Commander. We are standing in the path of an avalanche and you are too proud to step aside. He raised his voice, addressing the frozen security team. Look at the tactical feed. The targeting systems cannot lock it. Our reactor cores cannot match its energy signature. If we follow Skarn, we will all be crushed into spheres and displayed as a warning to the rest of the Dominion. A tense, unbearable silence stretched across the bridge. The Leviathan hovered in the blackness outside, patient as a tombstone, its drift caster arrays still glowing a menacing, dormant gray. It was not pressing the attack. It was waiting. The human admiral had made his offer. The ball was now in Kresh's hands. Admiral Holt observed the standoff through the Leviathan's optical spyware, a microscopic feed drilled directly into the Vrex flagship's hull wiring. He saw the weapon aimed at Skarn's head. He saw the hesitation. The AI, a presence called Afen, whispered into his neural cortex. Probability of defection has reached 62%. Kresh is overriding combat psychoconditioning. Recommend broadcasting the evidence packet to solidify capitulation. Holt gave a mental nod, a single, tired synaptic firing. He was an old man, older than his physical age suggested. The Reclaimer-class command neural interface aged a human body rapidly. His connection to the ship's singularity tap was killing him slowly, a price he had paid willingly. He had been a young lieutenant when the first Vrex raiding parties hit the outer colonies. He had a daughter once, a girl with a bright laugh and a fascination with nebula clouds. Her name was Anya. The Vrex had taken her on Outpost 9. The AI didn't need to calculate his motivation. Holt wasn't here for justice. He was here for a tally, but he was a soldier. He would give the mutineer a chance his daughter never had. Often, Holt vocalized, his voice a dry rasp. Send the evidence packet. Show them the price of Skarn's path. Show them the alternative. Aboard the Vrex flagship, every screen, every tactical feed, every personal data slate in the fleet suddenly flickered and warped. The image of the imploded cruisers was replaced by a high-definition visual feed. It was not human propaganda. It was raw Vrex archival footage, stolen by Terran intelligence years ago. It showed the interior of a Vrex processing facility. It showed the vats. It showed the screaming rows of living, conscious captives being chemically deconstructed, their pain harvested for chemical compounds. And then, it cut to footage of the Terran Armada's sanctuary protocol, a clean, heavily guarded processing station where captured Vrex soldiers were stripped of weapons, fed, and given medical care. A place of cold, efficient pacifism. The contrast was a sledgehammer to the Vrex psyche. Kresh's hesitation evaporated. The logical choice between grinding, agonizing consumption in Skarn's meat pits and sterile, safe confinement under human watch was no choice at all. It was salvation. Skarn roared and spun, his heavy claw swiping for the sidearm, his pride finally overriding his strategic paralysis. But Kresh was faster. The plasma bolt was a clean, blue-white lance that struck Skarn in the center of his thorax. The war commander's roar choked into a wet, shocked gurgle. He looked down at the black, smoking wound in his own chest, his dominant hearts vaporized. He crumpled to the deck, his predatory mind never comprehending that he had been out-evolved. Kresh stepped over Skarn's body and slammed his fist onto the communication relay. Terran vessel, this is acting War Commander Kresh. We surrender, the fleet surrenders, ceasefire. The transmission cut through the static, often processed the Vrex syntax, confirmed the cessation of target locks, and reported a 98% probability of genuine capitulation. Holt closed his eyes, the ghost of Anya fatting in the darkness. The killing stopped. The driftcaster arrays dimmed. The sky above Vadris Minor fell silent. Part 6. The Sanctuary Protocol. On the surface of Vadris Minor, Commander Valara Ezri felt the cessation of the bombardment before the seismic sensors reported it. The deep, bone-rattling thunder that had been her constant companion for hours simply stopped. It left behind a ringing, hollow void that was somehow more terrifying than the destruction. She unclenched her jaw, unaware she had been grinding her teeth. Jaraz, the young comms officer, was staring at the sensor console, his face a mask of uncomprehending shock. "Commander, the Vrex fleet," Jaraz stammered, his voice cracking. Their reactor signatures are cycling down. Their weapon ports are sealing. There's a massive energy discharge on their flagship, but I think they just killed their own leader." Valara pushed herself up from the plotting table, her muscles screaming in protest. She staggered to the main periscope array, a jury-rigged optical tube that bypassed the shattered satellite network. She looked up. The dagger-like silhouettes of the Vrex capital ships were drifting, not in attack formation, but in the scattered, confused clusters of a surrendered fleet. They were waiting for judgment. And then she saw the shuttle, a single, angular black shape descending through the burning, debris-streaked atmosphere. It was huge, easily the size of a corvette, but it was unmistakably a landing craft. It moved with the slow, deliberate grace of absolute authority. It wasn't racing to provide aid. It was descending to claim ownership of the outcome. The Vrex armada parted in the sky to let it pass, their surviving ships physically moving out of its trajectory in a display of terrified deference. Valara climbed the shattered steps of the colony's central square, the air thick with dust and the smell of vaporized rock. 200 survivors had gathered, their faces smeared with soot and tears, looking up at the burning tapestry of the sky. The black shuttle descended on silent repulsors, its landing struts touching the scorched flagstones with a heavy, final thud. Steam hissed from its cooling vents. The loading ramp lowered without a sound, a slab of seamless metal folding into an inviting staircase. Admiral Holt descended. He was not what they expected. He was gaunt, his uniform hanging slightly loose on a frame that had sacrificed physical mass for neural capacity. His hair was a shock of prematurely white, and his eyes, sunken in their sockets, held a weariness that was older than metal. He carried a heavy data slate. He approached Valara, who stood frozen, a greasy, dented survival rifle hanging loosely in her grip. He didn't look at the survivors with pity. He looked at them with recognition. "Commander Ezri," Holt said, his voice low and rough, the voice of a man who had not used it for conversation in a very long time. "Your final log was received. It was weaponized. It saved your people." Valara tried to speak, tried to ask 1,000 questions about the ghost fleet, the impossible rescue, the armada of one. But the words caught in her dry throat. She looked at the data slate in his hand. It wasn't a blueprint or a weapon. It was a list of names, thousands of them, the dead of the outer colonies. She saw the entry near the bottom, Outpost 9. Anya Holt, age 7. Understanding hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't a rescue mission. This wasn't a military operation. This was a funeral dirge made of dark metal and singularity drives. "The tally stops today," Holt said, his voice carrying across the silent square. "Earth didn't ignore you. The core worlds didn't forget you. We had to kill the head, not the hand. The Vrex Dominion command structure is gone. Their home clusters are burning. The armada that just arrived isn't just the Leviathan. The rest of the fleet is pushing into their core systems, ensuring they never threaten another frontier world. But we couldn't begin until we had secured the last life." He looked up at the sky, at the trembling, fading light of the broken Vrex ships. "I was left behind with the slowest ship and the heaviest burden, guard duty. The Leviathan has enough firepower to crack a star, but its only mission today was to stand still and wait for the first Vrex commander smart enough to see the trap." Valara followed his gaze upward. The debris field was not just the wreckage of the Vrex vanguard. She realized now, with a chill that ran up her spine, that the distant, glittering points of light were not stars. They were drive flares, thousands of them emerging from the dark on the edge of the system. The Ghost Fleet, the most powerful armada Earth had ever built, was transiting through the system, a passing hurricane of steel on its way to end a war. The Leviathan hadn't just been a shield. It had been bait, a rear guard left to test the mettle of the Dominion's predators. And the Vrex had failed the test completely. Part 7. What the Darkness Fears. The night sky of Vadris Minor had become a river of silent, moving lights. The thousands of drive flares from the Terran Ghost Fleet stretched in a glittering, deadly parade across the constellation of the nebula. It was the largest concentration of military force Valara had ever witnessed, a moving city of planet killers and stealth carriers that blotted out the background radiation of the universe itself. The Vrex surrendered fleet, cowed and weaponless, was being herded into a jump formation by a swarm of Terran corvettes. Kresh had made the right choice. The alternative would not have been a battle. It would have been a smear. Admiral Holt stood apart from the celebrating colonists. He had moved to a low ridge overlooking the crater-pocked valley where the main agricultural domes had once stood. The domes were gone now, vaporized by the initial Vrex strikes, but the soil underneath was still Terran soil, fertilized with the sweat and blood of the settlers. Holt knelt down, his old joints complaining with a faint pop, and scooped a handful of the dark, still warm dirt into his gloved palm. Valara approached him quietly. She had shed her command jacket, standing in just a stained, gray thermal undershirt, her expression a complex mixture of relief, grief, and fierce, burning curiosity. She stood a respectful distance behind him, watching the Admiral study the dirt like it held the secrets of the universe. "The series conventions," Valara said softly, breaking the silence. "The Vrex think they're a joke, a set of rules for a war that soft species can't win. They don't understand why we'd tie our hands with sanctuary protocols when we could just erase them. Kresh didn't surrender to save his life. He surrendered because he saw the option." Holt let the dirt sift through his fingers, scattering on the wind. He stood up, his back straightening with a visible effort. The Vrex Dominion, like every predator that ever looked at humanity and saw prey, made a fundamental miscalculation. They mistook our ethics for weakness. They saw the sanctuary, the rules of engagement, the treaties, and the hand extended in peace, and they assumed it was the hand of a coward. They never realized it was the discipline of a predator far more dangerous than they could ever conceive. He turned to face her, his sunken eyes reflecting the moving stars of the armada above. "A wild beast bites anything that moves. It has no rules, it is predictable. A disciplined soldier, a protector, chooses when to bite and where and trains to bite hardest when the line is crossed. The Vrex crossed every line. They attacked civilians. They built processing camps. They targeted the innocent, so the leash came off. Not just for the Leviathan, for all of us. All the rage, all the lost little girls, all the burned colonies. We bottled it up, we refined it, and we turned it into that fleet up there." He gestured toward the sky, toward the silent, passing armada of nightmares. "They thought no one would come," Valara whispered, her voice breaking. We were just a frontier speck. We thought we were too small to matter." "You sent a distress call," Holt replied. "That makes you Terran. That makes you family. Earth doesn't leave family behind. We can't always be on time. Sometimes the galaxy is too big and the enemies are too fast, but we always come. And when we do, we bring enough firepower to make sure we never have to come back." A deep, resonant chime sounded from the Leviathan in orbit, a low-frequency pulse that vibrated in the chest of every human on the surface. The Armada was beginning its jump sequence. One by one, the drive flares in the sky began to wink out, folding space and vanishing into the deep black toward the Vrek's home clusters. The war was not over for them. It was just beginning. The Leviathan remained. The single, massive ship did not move. Its dark hull absorbed the light of the distant nebula, a silent guardian that would stay in orbit until the relief convoys arrived, until the repair crews had rebuilt the dome, until the colony was safe. It was the slowest ship in the fleet, burdened with the heaviest weaponry, a final, absolute promise. Valara looked at the Admiral, at the data slate still clutched in his other hand, the list of the fallen. "Anya, your daughter, is this your tally?" Holt didn't flinch. "This is my compass. The Ghost Fleet runs on cold logic and tactical algorithms. I run on something older. I run on the memory of a laugh I can't quite remember the sound of. That's what the Vreks failed to calculate. They thought the human armada was the scariest thing Earth had. They were wrong." He looked at her, and for a fleeting second, the ghost of a warmth cracked the stern, weary mask of his face. "The scariest thing Earth has is a parent with a ship," he said. "And there are 40,000 parents on those ships up there, Commander. So no, the Vreks won't be coming back. Ever. The tally stops today. You're safe now. Get your people some food and some rest." Admiral Soren Holt turned and walked back toward his massive black shuttle, his silhouette small against the burning, debris-streaked sky. Commander Valara Esri watched him go, the weight of the colony's despair lifting and being replaced by a terrifying, awe-inspiring realization. Humanity hadn't just sent a rescue party to save 4,000 souls. They had sent a monument to every soul they had ever lost, and that monument had a firing mechanism. The Leviathan hummed overhead, a patient, eternal sentinel. And in the heart of the galaxy, a war of vengeance, fueled not by hatred but by a protective, unbreakable love, finally began.